Hey leaders, welcome to Happy Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Coach T. Payne. Today we're talking about something that does not show up on your performance reports or your official evaluations, but it definitely determines whether you should be leading in the first place. Emotional maturity under pressure is the topic of this week. Let's jump right in. In leadership, you should know and probably are experiencing that pressure is not rare. Pressure in leadership is routine. It's part of what makes leadership leadership. Deadlines compress, budgets often tighten, stakeholders don't always agree, your team doesn't always get along, reputation is very visible, and expectations constantly increase while resources seem to constantly become more restricted. And in those moments, and many like that, something subtle happens. Emotion. Emotion can begin to replace principle if we're not careful, especially when leading under pressure. Now, when it happens, and sometimes it doesn't replace principle emotion or dramatically. Emotion doesn't replace principle very dramatically or explosively, but incrementally. Incremental shifts shape culture far more than broad dramatic failures. Pressure moments are defining moments. Pressure reveals what is anchoring you, not what you claim anchors you. So, in leadership, it's key to understand how we are going to perform emotionally under certain pressures and to work to make those outcomes good for you and for your leadership team. So let's be clear, because I've heard this so many times. Emotions are not weaknesses. Being emotional is not a negative, right? Emotions are emotions are information. Emotions signal importance. They signal threat. Emotions signal values. But when emotion becomes the driver of decision making instead of principle being the driver of decision making, leadership destabilizes. Principle asks questions like, what is aligned with our values? And what protects long-term integrity? Principle will ask, what strengthens this organization beyond me? While emotion will ask, how do I relieve this pressure right now? And under sustained pressure, that distinction between leading under principle and leading emotion becomes extremely visible. And mishandled can be extremely unproductive and possibly even destructive to you or the team that you're leading. So let's talk about some signs, from my opinion, my point of view, that show that you might be teetering on leading through your emotion and not leading through principle. So the first one is what I call the any means necessary leadership. This is leadership that will get the goal accomplished by any means necessary. So the first sign that you might be leading from emotion instead of principle is this one. Some ways that you can evaluate if you are leading this way is how hard you try to accomplish your organizational goals, especially when you see pockets of things that are leading your people to over execute their talent, to be drained, to be disconnected. But you continue to attempt your organizational goals by any means necessary. And in these cases, the mission becomes everything. At all costs, this mission will be done. The target becomes the sacred thing, and the path becomes negotiable. Some people talk about the ways and the ends and the means. And when you're leading this way, you start to ignore everything except the end. You might not say it out loud, but you're willing to negotiate how to get to the end when you start leading emotionally under pressure instead of by your principles under pressure. Internally, you start to think, we just got to get this done. You may even say things like, figure it out, or I don't care how you get there, just make it happen. But how you achieve a goal teaches the organization what you truly value and what the organization values. If the process erodes trust or creates shortcuts or compromises your organizational ethics and morals, if pressure justifies cutting relational corners and violating certain prescriptions that make your organization who it is, then you might win the metric, but you will lose the credibility. And you'll profit the whole world and finish the rest. Principle governs both the outcome and the method, while on the contrary, emotion prioritizes outcome alone. Here's what happens culturally when leaders operate by the any means necessary type of leadership that I just explained. A few things will happen. Teams will begin hiding information because speed will matter more than transparency. It won't matter how they're getting to the outcome. It just matters that they get there. And so your team will not give you information that you should want to have as a leader to lead them well. Also, what happens when leaders lead this way is middle managers, they begin absorbing ethical tension, because what happens is the top line results matter more to be internally aligned, and middle managers are responsible to be internally aligned to the organization. But if you are a by any means necessary type of leader because you're leading from emotion, then what's happening to your middle management is over time, they start to operate in fear instead of clarity. And this doesn't happen, hear me here, it does not happen because you're a malicious leader or you're bad, a bad person. We're just refining. We're talking about refining how we lead here, right? But because pressure will replace principle under certain conditions when you respond emotionally, this is what happens. But mature leaders will pause under these circumstances, and they will pause long enough to ask, if everybody in the organization copied how I am handling this pressure, what would become of this organization and what would be the culture of this organization? The second sign that I think we should be aware of when we are leading from emotion and not our principle is silencing dissent. So another sign that you are operating from emotion and not principle is how you handle dissent. Sometimes you can look to see if you're not creating dissent or allowing space for those who think differently than you in your advisory circle. You could be headed for leading under emotion. Under pressure, dissent can feel like delay. And we have all been there, I'm sure. Challenge can feel like obstruction, but disagreement is not disloyalty, it is insulation. If no one can question your assumptions as a leader, no one can protect you from blind spots as a leader. So let's compare what's happening here. Emotion seeks affirmation. Emotional leaders, or leaders who lead from emotion, want to have their ideas validated. But a principled leader seeks accountability. Emotion will want the reassurance, but principle will want the refinement. Choose the principle. Strong leaders will intentionally create rooms where respectful dissent is safe. You should do this at every opportunity because long-term credibility requires that little bit of friction that you get, when you allow dissent. Long-term credibility requires friction because your organization requires that you have a little bit of dissent as you're leading them to the next thing and to the finish line. I welcome dissent in all my leadership levels that I've been in because dissent breeds a holistic view of where this organization needs to go. And you do it respectfully and you set the parameters, but if you isolate dissent, you could be headed for leading from emotion without principle. Number 3, you could be leading from emotion if you act without considering what happens beyond this immediate goal being accomplished. You saw the big puzzle today, right? But at the cost of the stabilization of your team or the sustainability of the organization tomorrow. You might hit the goal of reducing the cost, but by doing that, and in doing that, I should say, you eroded morale. People don't want to come to work anymore. They don't like the place that they come to and spend the majority of their hours every day. You may speed execution, sounds great, but you might have done it at the cost of weakening collaboration. Strategic maturity requires second order thinking. Not just, does this work, but what does this create next? Emotions, when you lead from emotion, you might seek relief, but when you lead from principle, you seek sustainability. And your organization needs a leader that is leading from principle and not emotion, because the emotion is good to validate you as the leader in the moment, but the principle will keep the organization going long after you finish whatever it is you were there to do. Here's a 4th sign. There's 5. Here's a 4th sign that you might be leading from the seat of your emotion instead of the seat of your principle. Here it is. Your decisions reflect personal survival over organizational longevity. This is subtle. It might look like protecting your image or covering your reputation. It might look like avoiding difficult conversations or even deflecting responsibility. You could experience that you're withholding information, you're preserving control maybe, but leadership, if it is nothing else, it is stewardship. And stewardship requires thinking beyond your own tenure. If you're leading, you have to be thinking about the longevity of the organization once your portion is complete, no matter how long or how short. You have to ask yourself this. If I removed my name from this decision, would I still defend it? This is a way to check your emotion. You can ask something like, if my organization must absorb consequences long after I move on, is this decision, is this way that I'm leading my team still the right way to go? Is it still the right call? Leading from emotion will protect your position, but leading from principle will protect your purpose, and it will keep your organization intact. And if your organization is important to your community, society, a greater organization, then as a leader, you want to keep the organization intact, even if you have to forego some of your own personal protection of your reputation. You have to really weigh what matters most and what are you willing to pay to get that accomplished. Sign number 5 that you might be leading from emotion instead of from principle is you force your methodology even when better alternatives exist. Let that sink in. You cling to your own familiarity. You equate your approach with competence and ulterior approaches with incompetence. You defend your process instead of evaluating the results. But mature leaders are not loyal to their methods, but they are loyal to the outcomes of the organization aligned with the values of the organization. Keyword here is a principled leader consistently focuses on the organization, while a leader who's leading from emotion consistently focus on their own survival and they're looking inwardly. When you want to get out of this fifth phase of leading with your emotion, think about what you do when someone brings solutions. Do you consider that there could be a better solution to what you're driving at and it didn't come from your brain? If someone brings a better solution, a leader from principle will evaluate the solution. But a leader from emotion will defend their territory. They will double down on what they said in the first place. And that is what we call defensive position. And defense of your way of thinking, that's not leading. It could be insecurity. Okay, so now what, leaders? What do you do if you're listening to some of these 5 things and you're like, "Oh, I think I'm doing this and I don't want to do this. I don't want to lead from emotion cuz I'm a person of principle." Well, you reset, right? You still have today, so you reset. How do you reset? First is awareness. Name the emotion that is driving you to act from the place of emotion. Sometimes in a lot of leaders, it's the fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of exposure, think imposter syndrome, fear of irrelevance. Second, look at alignment. Return to the center, return to your values, return to your stated commitments and what you said you were going to do if you ever got the chance to be in this position. Return to the long view, like the end game has to matter again. Third, invitation, and this is big. Invite counsel before you make final decisions under pressure. I'm not saying that all your decisions need to go through a council of people. I am saying that when you are under pressure, wisdom is inviting a counsel to help you navigate what you're going to decide. Pressure narrows your perspective, but community will expand it. Having different minds in the room will help you. Emotional maturity is not about suppressing your emotions, it's about governing them, right? You can feel deeply, you can feel your feelings while you're leading, but you can also decide deliberately, even though you're feeling your feelings while you're leading, because leadership, like most other things, is an emotional journey. It doesn't make you weak because you feel it. It means you're leading because you're feeling what you're leading. So as leaders, let's understand some things. Pressure in leadership is not going to go away. You can't wish it away. You can't avoid it away. And if you watched the previous episode, you can't AI it away. In fact, the truth is, as your leadership expands, as you continue to rise in your organization, as you take on more responsibility in your family, leadership roles, your pressure is going to increase. So the question is not whether you will feel the pressure of leading. The question is, what will lead you when you feel the pressure of leading? And your two choices are emotion or principle. I encourage you as a leader to strengthen your anchor now before the pressure comes. Decide what it is that grounds you, what keeps you who you are, what makes you be able to stay in the center when things are going all kind of crazy around you. Because pressure will reveal where you're anchored. So get anchored in the right places. Now, what I want to ask y'all to do is have the conversation about this with your own leadership circles. Not in a way to bash your boss or to talk about things that are not going well, but as a way for self-evaluation. Whichever level of leadership you're in, you could stand to evaluate yourself against these 5 pillars that we laid out to see if you sometimes, often, more times than not, evaluate and make decisions from the seat of emotion or the seat of principle. And then in evaluating, you're able to shift where you want to put your focus and your priority. Of course, I want you to follow and like and share and subscribe. But at the very least, I hope that this conversation has been helpful for you. And I love to hear what you have to say in the comments, only if it's good. I'm just kidding. I'll take dissenting opinions also, right? That's what we just talked about. So put your comments in the box below and let's continue this conversation. Until next time, leaders, happy leading.